Greetings, fellow travelers, vagrants, explorers, wildlanders, and welcome to episode 72 of the Retro Wildlands. My name is Nomad, and this is my gaming podcast where I like to share my thoughts and experiences with a video game that I've discovered or rediscovered while roaming the gaming wildlands. Thank you very much for tuning into the show today. It's always a pleasure having company as we set off into the gaming wilderness and undertake a new adventure. In anticipation of your arrival, Dee Dee, our canine expedition leader, has made sure that the fire is warm and the cooler is well stocked with whatever it is that you're craving. So why don't you have a seat by the fire, my friend? Oh, and be sure to give Dee Dee a nice scratch or two behind the ears as you go by. Our boy loves those, and who doesn't, right? Dexter, our head of security and protection, is busy securing the perimeter and taking stock of all weapons and gear. We've recently had a run-in with some unsavory folk around these parts, and Dexter is just making sure that we're prepared for the worst. Yep, that's right, Dexter. And those people were led by the Kingpin, the biggest of the big crime bosses. He and his goons have staked a claim in New York City, making it extremely hard for average citizens just trying to live their lives peacefully and in accordance with the law. He is an absolute menace, preying upon the weak and leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. His main underlings, Hitman, Jigsaw, Assassin, and Saijo Kanaka, have done nothing but further Kingpin's plans and causing nothing but pain and hardship wherever they go. It's one thing that we're protecting ourselves against the likes of these creeps, but the more I think about it, these guys need to be stopped. No, not just stopped. Punished. On today's episode, we're checking out a game featuring my favorite comic book character, Frank Castle, also known as the Punisher. A decorated U.S. Marine who served in Vietnam, he took his family to New York's Central Park for a picnic. There, he and his family witnessed a mob execution. To cover up what happened, the mobsters opened fire on Frank and his family, killing his wife Maria and his 2 children. Somehow, though, Frank survived. Frank tried to get justice for his family's murder through the judicial system, but their inability, or perhaps their unwillingness, to prosecute the mobsters sent Frank into a spiral of grief, depression, and ultimately rage. He soon declared a one-man war on the mob and crime as a whole. Falling back on his military training and tapping into his willingness to just get the job done by any means necessary, Frank Castle geared up and armed himself to the teeth. He donned a white skull on his chest and went to work, killing his way to the top. But contrary to popular belief, though, this was not about vengeance. This was purely punishment. In his mind, Frank Castle had died in the park that day with his family. From then on, only the Punisher remained. My interest in the Punisher developed when I was young, and it was a direct result of my dad's love for the character. Even as a kid, I couldn't help but be fascinated by this comic book character that had no superpowers and did all the things normal superheroes wouldn't do in order to stop evil. As I learned about the Punisher, my dad never made it a point to glorify anything the Punisher did. Though I have to admit it was cool seeing him riddle a bad guy full of holes. The Punisher did things differently, and he had some compelling reasons. Reasons I wouldn't really understand until I was a bit older. While I got my hands on some of my dad's comics, which I still own today, some of my favorite memories with this character were in the few video games that he was in. On the original Nintendo, the Punisher was a sort of third-person rail shooter, and it had you going through levels shooting the bad guys and working your way to the top of the crime food chain. It was as simple as that, and captured the essence of the Punisher and the villains that he was fighting, even if the experience itself was kind of repetitive. I can't remember where I played the game for the very first time, but I remember it fondly. There was barely any music in the game, so all I remember outside some of the levels I ran through were the unending sounds of gunfire. I always had fun playing the game, and while you would think it would be so I could kill all the bad guys, I was more interested in racking up a high score. But whacking all the goons on screen certainly was fun. So, when I found myself going through my collection of games, I couldn't help but give The Punisher another try and see if 40-year-old me had as much enjoyment with this game as I did when I was a kid. Is The Punisher on the original Nintendo a sleeper rail shooter hit that you absolutely need to play? Or is it just a miserable, obtuse experience that is more punishment to you than it is fun? Well, my friends, I'm excited to get into this one and share my thoughts on not just the game, but on the Punisher as a comic book character, and why, of all the superheroes out there, this character is still my absolute favorite. Now, if you're new to the show, I like to kick things off first by chatting it up with you all for a little bit and give everyone a peek behind the scenes here in the Retro Wildlands. Depending on what's on my mind, I like to share what's going on with the show itself, talk about what games I'm playing or have completed since we got together last, what projects I might be planning, what's going on in my personal life, or whatever else I feel like vomiting into this here microphone. I'll also take some time to read and respond to any comments I received about the Punisher from our Retro Wildlands social media pages, in an effort to give the community a moment to sound off their thoughts about the game or the character. Now, if none of that interests you and you're just here for the Punisher vigilante experience, absolutely no worries. You have the ability to skip ahead in the podcast about, let's say about 15-20 minutes, and you should get into the game talk at that point. That's always an estimate on my part, so I always make it a point to put timestamps in the show notes so you can see exactly where you need to go if you decide not to stick around. But, like I always say, you should absolutely stick around while we catch up. We're going to talk a bit of video games, and your fellow Wildlanders will get a chance to sound off their thoughts to the rest of us. And I can't think of a better way to get our expedition prepared to enact some well-deserved punishment. So, without further ado, let's get into our opening segment that I like to call Campfire Catchup. Well, it took a lot longer to get this episode up and running, and I want to thank you all for your patience with that. If you happen to listen to the last episode of the show, I mentioned at the end that I was going to be focusing on building up the brand new Retro Wildlands website, which you can access at theretrowildlands.com. I've been wanting to create a more robust website for a while now that would allow you all the ability to listen to all of our episodes in one place, and also allow you all easy access to the content that I've put up over on YouTube, as well as creating a space for some more written reviews and blogs that I've been wanting to write for a while now. A lot of time was spent tweaking the pages just the way I wanted them, importing the show and YouTube channel over, and I even created a page specific to all of the guest appearances that I've had on all the other podcasts that were nice enough to bring me along. So, if you can't get enough of me for some reason, and/or you wanted to check out some other awesome creators, that's something you can do now over on the new website. I also spent some time writing a few mini reviews on a couple games that I've played this year that I didn't want to make a long-form podcast or video out of. At the time of this recording, you can check out my mini thoughts on Metroid Dread, Super Mario Odyssey, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and Firewatch. Just head on over to the website and click on Expedition Logs if you're interested in checking those out. I even added a little music player to each one of the blogs that lets you listen to a track from whatever game that I'm covering or talking about if you want some nice background music to set the mood. Kind of a basic thing, I'm sure, but I don't know, it's just kind of cool to me. It was pretty fun learning how to code all of that kind of stuff, and I hope you enjoy the blogs and all parts of the website if you do decide to partake and check it all out. The next thing I'm going to try and figure out is how you can contact me directly through the website, so that's my next project. I don't really want to create an email just for the show, but I might end up having to. Either way, whether I do that or you decide to get a hold of me through our social media pages, I would love your feedback on the new website. More than that, if there's something that you'd like to see, feature-wise or whatever else, and I can figure out how to make it happen, I am all for it. So once more, our new website can be found at theretrowildlands.com. Another reason for the delay in this episode is that I took another vacation. Yep, 2 week-long vacations this year, barely a month apart. I am spoiled, I am lucky, and I am grateful. I didn't really advertise that I was stepping away for another week, but I ended up going to Kill Devil Hills out in North Carolina and enjoyed a nice beach vacation with my wife's side of the family. A whole bunch of us went for this trip, including my wife, her 2 sisters, my brother-in-law, father-in-law, all the kids, and a few family friends this time around too. It was a huge pile of people, but we all sprung for a huge beach house that was very close to the water. This sort of trip to the Outer Banks is one that we tend to take most every year, and it's the one that I look forward to the most because it's purely a vacation where we make it a point to have absolutely no plans and nobody is obligated to do anything at any point. Really, the only obligation is just live in the moment and occasionally help with the upkeep of the house. For me, other than hanging out with the kids and the family, I always tried to make it a point to get some me time in, and this year I read a lot, I gamed a lot, and I absolutely drank a lot too. Book-wise, Justine got me a copy of the latest in the Last Ronin comic book series, the dark and gritty Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle storyline from publisher IDW. I highly recommend you check out The Last Ronin if you haven't already. A mature and grounded TMNT narrative is as awesome as it sounds, though the sequel to that, The Last Ronin Re-Evolved, while a good read, wasn't as good as the original in my mind. Still, it was really cool to read through on vacation. I also came across a book in our house called The Greatest Beer Run Ever, which chronicles the true story of John Chicky Donahue, a merchant marine who travels back to Vietnam during the war to find his friends and bring them a beer. Over the last few years, I've really gotten into books on the US military, so when I saw this book, I figured, what the hell, I'll give it a whirl. And all things considered, it was pretty damn good. It was a nice mix of good-natured humor, relatable storytelling, but also didn't hold any punches when it came to the things that the author saw during the war and during his time on his epic quest. While some of the side stories drug on just a little too long for my liking, I thought it was a nice, lighthearted adventure that fit the backdrop of being on vacation with people that I care about quite perfectly. So, all things considered, that was a very pleasant surprise. But as far as gaming goes, there was no way I wasn't taking something with me to work on from my massive backlog. Still riding high from completing Metroid Dread earlier this year, I decided to take my Switch with me and dive into Metroid Prime Remastered. I was considering playing Prime on the GameCube to get the most authentic experience, but enough people told me that the remastered version was more or less the definitive way to play and the superior experience, so I ran with it. It ended up being the perfect choice, and anytime I fired the game up, I had a hard time putting it down. Metroid Prime, in terms of the larger Metroid storyline, takes place right after the original NES game, or the Zero Mission remake on the Game Boy Advance. Originally released on the GameCube in 2002, and later getting a pretty spiffy remaster on the Nintendo Switch in 2023, Prime follows the notorious intergalactic bounty hunter Samus Aran. Samus investigates a distress call she picked up from a derelict space pirate frigate. During her exploration of the frigate, Samus runs into Ridley, her nemesis from the first game, and follows him to the planet Talon 4. Once she gets there, Samus uncovers the aftermath of a massive meteor impact that seemingly poisoned the planet with a substance called Phazon, which we find out the space pirates are attempting to weaponize. It's up to Samus and us as the player to explore Talon 4's ruins, battle its corrupted creatures and a few space pirates, and put a stop to their plans. But will Samus be able to put a stop to the evil that is quite literally corroding the planet? Or will the space pirates unlock unlimited power? The first thing that you'll notice about Metroid Prime, which is one of the biggest reasons this game stands out today and stood out back when it was released, is that Prime is a first-person experience and the world that you inhabit is fully 3D, which is in stark contrast to the previous 2D side-scrolling entries in the series. While I didn't really have much Metroid experience when I was younger, and I still kinda don't today, I was very interested in this game, but also a little perplexed by it. How in the world can you take a game like Metroid, which works so well on a 2D plane, and transfer it to a 3D space and make the experience first person? For some reason, I had a hard time figuring out how it would work, but once you jump into Samus's power suit, it all makes sense. Even though the game offers a new perspective and way to play, the emphasis on exploration, discovery, and backtracking with new abilities all remained intact. As you take on this adventure, you'll be exploring interconnected environments like jungles, lava caverns, an ancient Chozo temple, and a lot more. The usual assortment of power-ups are present too. You start off with your basic arm cannon, but eventually you'll find similar gems like the Morph Ball, Power Bombs, and the Grapple Beam. You'll also get your hands on different visors for your helmet, like an X-ray scope and thermal visor. They don't just help you out in combat though, you'll need these extra visors to progress through certain areas. What made Metroid Prime fun and engaging for me, unlike other games in this genre, was the balance that this game struck between exploration, puzzle solving, and combat. Combat was especially enjoyable in this game. Using a lock-on feature, it was easy to make every shot count, but not every enemy was going to lie back and take multiple blaster shots to the face. Some enemies can take a lot of punishment, while others are so nimble that they'll close the distance on you before you can dispatch them. That is where dodging comes into play. While locked onto an enemy, you can sidestep to the left or to the right, and it is pretty satisfying when you jump out of the way of danger while still keeping your sights trained on your target. Exploring the world is about as fun as you'd expect, and since your view is now first person, it's a whole new ballgame when it comes to getting your bearings and discovering the way forward. The whole planet feels alive and very immersive, with everything feeling substantial and rich. You also have the ability to scan enemies and objects in the environment in order to get information which can help you out in combat, help with a puzzle, or give you more backstory to the planet that you're on and what it is the space pirates are actually doing there. But that said, this leads me into the few criticisms I do have of Metroid Prime. While I felt like this game nailed the transition to 3D, there were enough new game mechanics to keep things fresh and the world itself was fascinating to explore, I had some pacing issues throughout my experience. First, just like any other Metroidvania-style game, there was a lot of backtracking. Now, I understand and I appreciate backtracking, don't get me wrong, but I feel like I was revisiting some of the same locations far more than I would have liked. Also, as part of the story, you have to collect so many of these ancient Chozo artifacts, and hardly any of them are in plain sight. As I progressed through the game, my mind was barely on these artifacts, so I often had to backtrack to an area once I found the means to keep exploring, but then again when I had to go back to those areas to do some artifact hunting once I remembered those things were a thing. It was just a bit too much, and I do fully acknowledge that I could have probably been more efficient with my time, but I'm still chalking it up as a gripe. I also went back and forth with how I felt about the scanning feature. On one hand, it was really cool going into a new area and scanning everything that I could to learn about the area or gain some insight into the story. But on the other hand, this brought the pace of exploration to a grinding halt in some spots as I slowed my roll in order to scan everything around me. Now, you can just as easily not scan anything and just press forward, but doing that will cause you to miss out on some vital clues and hints about progression, and scanning is one of the biggest ways to get any lure and backstory out of your experience, so I guess it all depends on how important that all is to you. All in all, even though Metroidvania-style games are still not my favorite, I really like this game and highly recommend it if you haven't played it for some reason. It's widely praised, and for good reason. I went into this experience skeptical that Nintendo would be able to take the Metroid series into the 3D space in a way that made sense, but they absolutely pulled it off. Between the gameplay, atmosphere, sound design, and music, this is another great game that puts you in a scenario where you're isolated, alone, and surrounded by multiple things that want to kill you, and yet makes you feel powerful and resourceful at the same time. I'm very glad I finally played this game, and I cannot wait to keep exploring the Metroid franchise. Other than completing Metroid Prime after getting home from vacation, I decided to fire up a narrative-driven adventure game called Firewatch. It was a pretty quick experience, only taking me about 4 hours to wrap it all up, but I really enjoyed this one. I ended up writing a mini review on this game, which you can check out on our new website, theretrowildlands.com, if you're at all curious about this one. I feel like I'm missing 1 or 2 games, but that should wrap up the games that I've completed since we talked last. As far as games that I'm currently playing, I started playing Final Fantasy Tactics again. Now, this was a game that I spent an incredible amount of time on when I was younger on the original PlayStation, and holy crap am I excited for the remaster of Tactics that's coming out at the end of September of this year. I planned to get the remaster day 1, but I ended up starting the War of the Lions version of Tactics on my PlayStation Portable ahead of that though. Why don't I just wait for the remaster to come out, you might be wondering? Well, I might have an opportunity to join up with another gaming podcast to talk about this game, and I just wanted to be prepared and see if this game holds up today. There'll be more on that later, so be sure to subscribe to our social media platforms for the latest on what I'm up to. Alright, and with that, I think that's enough catching up for one episode. It is time to transition to the reason that I assume you're all here today. It is time to talk about The Punisher. We had a few members of the Retro Wildlands community reach out with their comments on The Punisher for the original Nintendo over on some of our social media platforms. Let's start things off by seeing what they had to say. Our first comment comes in from our Retro Wildlands Blue Sky page. The Deleted Saves podcast reached out and said, "Man, this one takes me back. One of my favorite Marvel characters, and a game I loved that I was also bad at." My friend, I am 100% with you on not being all that great at this game. The Punisher on the NES is, by design, a fairly simple experience, but it can get really challenging. I talk about it more in the meat of the episode, but one of the big keys to being successful in this game is making sure you quickly and efficiently take out enemy threats. Anytime I would find myself getting killed on a normal level, it was because I let too many enemies on screen at once and found it near impossible to dodge all of the incoming bullets while remaining on the offensive. But if you managed to do that okay, there were still some bigger enemies that did massive damage with grenades and rocket launchers if you weren't paying attention. And until you learn their patterns, the bosses of this game were absolutely unforgiving. I only ever took out one of the Kingpin's stooges when I was younger, and never even came close to the other ones. But still, I had fun playing as my favorite Marvel character, and that made it all worth it. And I'd like to think that you were in agreement with that too, my friend. Next up, Poppy the Keaton reached out over on our Blue Sky page as well. Keaton said, "I was so into the Punisher in high school. Had the shirt, cut the pinups out of the comics and put them on the walls. It was odd that I never played this game when you think about it. Yeah, well, I outgrew that phase. Turns out forgiveness is cooler than murder in the real world." I really like that comment, Keaton, and I can relate to it in my own way. I also was really into the Punisher back in the day too, and I've honestly carried that interest into adulthood. I didn't have posters or anything up, but I did have the occasional Punisher t-shirt. I still do have a couple, though I don't wear them as much. I think it's more of a product of getting older and heavier more than anything, but what's changed for me about the Punisher as a character is that I understand him differently now. As a kid, it was all about the cool factor, the skull logo, all the action, the shooting, the idea of one man taking on impossible odds. As an adult, I still appreciate all of that, but I also see the Punisher as this layered character who reflects some pretty heavy themes: justice, grief, morality. So while forgiveness may be the better path in the real world, and it is absolutely a path I try my best to walk in my own life, I think the Punisher still works as a powerful story, kind of myth that lets you wrestle with those darker questions. That's what makes even a game like the NES Punisher fun to revisit. Yeah, it's an arcade-style shooter on the surface that isn't all that deep, but behind it is this character who's lasted decades because he taps into something deeper, I think. Our last community comment came from the Manatee King, my buddy Chris, over on our Retro Wildlands Instagram page. Chris had this to say: "All I know is that the Punisher is badass. He's essentially what BJ Blazkowicz turns into when he's in I Am Death Incarnate difficulty mode in the Wolfenstein series. In short, this game has some awesome shoes to fill in the awesome rampaging bloody justice department. But I also know the Punisher is one of your favorite characters, so I hope you found this game worthy, and I can't wait to find out more." Of all the comics that I've read with the Punisher, and even some of the live-action movies I've seen, it's very easy to agree that the Punisher is, in fact, 110% badass. But like I touched on a moment ago with Keaton's comment, the Punisher, especially as I've gotten older, is much more than that to me now. Part of what makes the Punisher stand out is just how brutal he can be with the bad guys. There's definitely that surface level appeal, and I like that side of him too. But what's kept me interested in Frank Castle all these years is the complexity underneath. He's not just a guy with guns, he's someone who went through unimaginable loss, and everything he does is tied back to that trauma. Depending on who's writing him, he can come across as a tragic figure, a cautionary tale, or even a symbol that people debate about in today's world. I think that's why he's lasted so long. People can see him as cool for all the action, or they can dig into the deeper questions about justice, morality, and how far is too far. For me, it's both. That mix of comic book action and the real human weight behind it all. The Punisher's game on the Nintendo obviously doesn't go that deep into the Punisher's character in that regard, but it does do a good job of making that surface level appeal fun, while giving you a taste of the larger comic book narrative. Without spilling all of my thoughts on this game, I do think I find it worthy of the character and the experience, though I will say the Punisher on the PlayStation 2 did it far better. Still, I am very excited to get into this one and put you into the shoes of Marvel's most controversial anti-hero. A huge thank you to Chris, Poppy the Keaton, and the Deleted Saves podcast for dropping their thoughts on the Punisher to be read on the show today. If you want to get in on the action, make sure to subscribe to the Retro Wildlands on social media. We have a presence over on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, and that's normally where I put out calls for comments when I'm working on the script for the next show. A reminder too, the Retro Wildlands is also part of the SuperPod Network of gaming podcasts, and we have a Discord server called the SuperPod Lounge, where I also put out a call for comments. I'll make sure to put a link to all of those things in the show notes for anyone interested in checking us out on social or joining up with us on Discord. I would love to hear your thoughts and read them on the show, so if you want to partake, giving us a follow on social media and checking out the Discord is how you can do it. Originally released in January in the year 1991, The Punisher on the original Nintendo put players in the role of the Punisher himself, and the mission was simple. Carve a path through the streets of New York City, taking on supervillains like Jigsaw and Hitman and more as you fight your way to the villain who oversees them all. The most dreaded, the most feared, dangerous, and most powerful crime lords in the entire Marvel Universe. Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin. In this over-the-shoulder rail shooter game, we're going to face off against countless goons and lowlives who all want to take us out. But with our military training, arsenal of weapons, and sheer drive to see the mission through, everyone is in for a rude awakening when the Punisher comes calling. So, let's gear up, Wildlanders. Stock up on weapons, make sure to grab some ammo, and make doubly sure that that skull is nice and bright. In the war against those who do evil unto others, we're not the one who dies. We're the one who does the killing. Growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a lot I got to experience. Video games were becoming more and more a part of my life, but before that, things like comics and cartoons were very present in my day-to-day. While I wasn't as into comics as I was into cartoons around this time, there was one thing that persisted through both mediums, and that was the superhero. Superheroes were something special back in the day. They were incredible people with extraordinary powers and abilities that were always saving the day. Some of the better portrayed superheroes also taught us some good life lessons through their great deeds and actions. And the best superheroes, at least in my mind, had the ability to allow me to relate to them as a person. Take Spider-Man, for instance. A lot of my exposure to Spider-Man originally was thanks to the Spider-Man animated series that was on in the 90s. In that series, we didn't just follow Spider-Man anytime he went on an adventure or set out to take down the bad guys. The show focused mainly on Peter Parker as he attended college. While there were plenty of times we got to see Spider-Man in action, the show made it a point to focus on Peter and his struggles with balancing the responsibilities of being a superhero, as well as balancing the responsibilities of his personal life. It sounds so mundane when it's said out loud like that, but this show did a great job of not just humanizing Spider-Man to me, but making him relatable. Granted, I wasn't going to college at this point in my life, and probably the most complicated thing I had going on was making sure I did all my homework before I was allowed to play video games, but this is what endeared me to some of the heroes that I really liked growing up. It wasn't just their powers, it was that personal side to them. Spider-Man was just a college kid trying to do the responsible thing given his incredible gifts while also trying to carve out a path for himself. Soon, there would be other superheroes that I gravitated towards as well for some of the same reasons. Wolverine from the X-Men was always fascinating to me. Not just how he could shred anything with his adamantium claws, but how a lot of his battles weren't physical ones. Many of his battles were internal battles that cycled through things like control, loss, and his struggle to find his own humanity despite his violent past. Batman was another great example. He was another hero that I immediately took to thanks to his own well-done animated series. Batman was the very first superhero that I liked that didn't have any superpowers, outside of just being really intelligent and committed to an idea. He chose to fight crime and stand up to evil, but he didn't do it because he could. He was driven by the trauma of losing his parents to a violent act, and this spurned a sort of need to bring evil under control in this dark and chaotic world he was in. He made it a point to never take a life, which I never really paid much attention to. That is, until I discovered the Punisher. It was easy to see the parallels between the Punisher and Batman. Both had no powers, but lost their families. Both committed themselves to fight evil in their own ways, but the one thing that set the Punisher apart was that he didn't commit to putting the bad guys in jail. The Punisher put them in the ground. Whereas the Joker or the Riddler could just find a way to break out of Arkham and find their way back to the streets, the villains that the Punisher defeated stayed gone. As a kid, I was still too young to really know what that meant and how taking that action impacts a person. But I was still fascinated all the same. To be clear, not by the killing or the violence the Punisher dished out, but how a normal person, void of powers, could stand up to those who did evil and fight them. The Punisher was stoic, focused, smart, calculating, and even despite his questionable methods, did what he felt was right based on his convictions and what he felt was worth fighting for. When we were all growing up, superheroes embodied ideals that us as kids could look up to. Courage, justice, selflessness. In a time when the world felt uncertain, I'm talking the Cold War in the 80s, rising crime in cities, cultural shifts, heroes like Batman, Superman, and the X-Men gave kids role models who fought back against fear and chaos while being relatable with very human flaws and struggles. The Punisher, for me, fell into this mold as well. While other heroes inspired kids through responsibility and resilience, the Punisher inspired me through strength and uncompromising justice. I never aspired to be this character, but his focused approach to his goals really resonated to me, and I really thought the way he looked was just really badass. I never followed the Punisher and his adventures religiously or anything, but my love for the character has persisted into adulthood. By the time I had discovered the Punisher as a character, my video game journey had taken me into the Super Nintendo era of my life. I rarely played anything on the original Nintendo anymore, but at some point I know I got my hands on the Punisher video game for the original Nintendo. I don't know if you, listening, ever experienced this before, but when I came across a copy of the Punisher out in the wild, it sparked memories of the game, and I knew I had played it before, but I could not for the life of me remember when or where that was. I had flashes of moments where I was shooting at the bad guys on the dirty New York streets, or when I was choosing what bad guy to go after by shooting his poster on a brick wall. I remember liking the game, but I don't think I was very good at it. And I couldn't remember if that was a me problem or if the game was bad. But when I saw the game, I immediately picked it up and added it to my physical collection. I had to relive this game and figure out what it meant to me and what it means to me now. So now that you know where the Punisher stood for me back then as a character and my amnesiac history with this game, it's time we get into the Punisher on the original Nintendo. Before we slot this game into our Nintendo and take to the streets ourselves, we need to peel back the layers a little bit and see exactly what it is that we're working with. So, what is this game? The Punisher on the original Nintendo is an arcade-style third-person rail shooter where players take control of the Punisher as he wages the ultimate one-man war against crime. The ultimate goal is to kill our way to the top of the crime food chain and take out the Kingpin. There are 6 levels in the game, each broken up into 3 parts. In the third part of each level, you'll come face to face with one of the Kingpin's henchmen, and it isn't until you kill all 5 of them that you can take on the final stage and go after the Kingpin himself. The Kingpin makes for an obvious target, but why are we going through all this trouble just to take him down? Well, according to the story setup in the game's instruction manual, it was the Kingpin who ordered the mob hit that happened in the park where Castle's family was, ultimately costing them their lives. The Kingpin, since then, has made a major effort to take control of New York City. He and his underlings have worked their way into the Big Apple's strategic crime locations and are making life impossible for decent citizens. The police seem powerless to stop it, which leaves only one man to do the job. While none of this is really explained in the game itself, it's pretty clear what our mission is. We're going to need to fight our way past armies of the Kingpin's flunkies, supporters, and minor league bosses in order to get to the master of crime himself. Nobody is willing to help, so we're going to have to do this ourselves. Alone. Just us and our arsenal of some of the most sophisticated portable weaponry known to man. But don't forget, while we're out hunting them, they are going to be out hunting us. Now, like I tend to say a lot when talking about older retro games, the instruction manual is a great source of backstory as well as information on the game, and I highly recommend you give it a once-over if you can. While The Punisher is a simple game, there's a decent amount going on that doesn't really get explained as you go. Sure, you're probably going to figure out a lot as you go, but there are a few things I didn't know that you could do until I read the instruction manual. The Punisher himself makes it a point to always prepare for battle before heading into it, so you should too. But speaking of heading into battle, I think it's about time we did just that. I'll fill you in on the mission specifics while we're on site, don't you worry. For now though, let's grab the game cartridge off the shelf and prep it for insertion into our Nintendo. Let me just grab it off the shelf here. Alright, and you should all know the ritual by now. One solid blow ought to do it. Oh yeah, there we go. Combat ready. Let's slide the game in and hit the power button. On screen, we're greeted with a standard issue wall of text that has the usual publisher and developer information. This game was designed and developed by Beam Software, which actually had its hand in a few notable games around this time, like Smash TV and Star Wars on the NES, and would go on to help with the development of games like Choplifter 3 and Shadowrun on the Super Nintendo. Neat. On screen, we also see that this game was published by... shit. Is that who I think it is? The text fades away and is replaced by the publisher's logo. 3 white letters with a rainbow behind them. LJN. Crap. We are not off to a great start. For the uninitiated, LJN has a pretty infamous reputation, I found out as I've been exploring games around this time period. LJN helped publish a lot of licensed games, ones that were based on popular movies, comics, or toys. Friday the 13th, Back to the Future, and the X-Men are some examples. On paper, especially back in the day, licensed games were actually pretty darn exciting. But the actual games themselves rarely lived up to the hype. If I summed up a lot of the common themes of LJN games, they would include, but are not limited to, clunky control schemes, frustrating difficulty spikes, unclear objectives, underwhelming visual and/or audio presentation, and poor hit detection. I will bet a buffalo nickel that at least one of you listening probably grew up going to the video store to rent a game with your parents, renting a game based on your favorite movie or comic, getting that game home, and being very, very disappointed in the game itself. Undoubtedly, though, it stuck with you. That's how LJN's reputation became what it did. Now, the big question you're probably thinking is, does The Punisher fall into any or all of the common themes I just mentioned? It kind of falls into a couple, not gonna lie. I often try my best not to let the opinions of others or something's reputation fully influence my feelings on something, so let's give the game a fair shake. Once the LJN logo goes away and that stink fades away, we see a very recognizable logo move from the bottom of the screen to the center. The Punisher skull. Then the black background fills in brown in some spots, showing us the dark silhouette of a man. There's no doubt who this person is, and if there is any doubt, it is all removed as soon as the figure opens fire with dual-wielded machine guns. The light from the muzzle flashes confirms it. The Punisher stands before us, unloading his weapons with a stoic, focused look on his face. I've no doubt that I probably had a stupid grin on my face when I saw this for the very first time as a kid. I've mentioned in past episodes that young Nomad tended to gravitate towards games that came off more mature than games like Super Mario Bros., and you couldn't get any more adult than this. Once the Punisher gets done killing whatever it was that he was shooting at, the Punisher himself fades away, but his trademark skull moves higher up on the screen. From there, the title screen appears. Under the skull, we see the words The Punisher in dark blue font and the words Press Start to Play under that. It's the perfect title screen. Simple, imposing, and gets the damn point across, just like the Punisher himself does. There's not much else to do other than press start, so why don't we go ahead and do that? We're taken to a brick wall that's taking up most of the screen. It's peppered with bullet holes, which is a nice touch, but what'll catch your eye right away are the 3 posters attached to the wall near the top. These are portraits of 3 of the 5 of the Kingpin's minions that we need to take down. Below that is a placard that has the game's current high score. It's set to 0 for now, but this was the one thing that drove me when I was a kid. I'm not really much of a high score chaser now, but back then, especially with this game, this was my one and only motivator. Even though the goal was to complete the game and get to the end, I never got anywhere close as a kid, so a high score was always my objective. Now, under the high score display are the words Select Mission, which is exactly what this screen is for. The 3 posters represent one of 3 stages, and whichever one we select, the bad guy pictured on the poster is the bad guy that we're going to face at the end of it all. There's no label for any of the posters, so until you select one, you aren't really going to know who it is that you're going after. Unless you are a Punisher, comic book super diehard, and the heavily pixelated portraits mean something to you. So to save you from having to find out on your own, I will say that the one on the left is Hitman, the one in the center is Jigsaw, and the one on the right is Colonel Klieg. Having played the game through, I don't really know if one level is more difficult than the other. They're all sort of the same from a difficulty standpoint, at least from my perspective. Each boss themselves is very unique though, and it'll be on you to figure out their patterns and kill them, and that will more than likely take some patience and practice. In my mind, I always assumed the Hitman levels were the easiest, and I always started off going after them. So, to keep that tradition alive, I vote that's who we set our sights on. But how exactly do we select that stage? Simple. We just need to shoot the poster. If you move your directional button around a little bit, you'll see that there's a white targeting reticle right on top of the Jigsaw poster. You just need to move that cursor to Hitman's poster and pull the trigger by pressing the A button. Or you can do what I always like to do and put a few more pot marks into that brick wall before we move on. Why don't you try it out? Seriously, it's a great way to blow off some steam and get used to how your weapon actually fires. Oh yeah, nice. Doesn't that feel good? I love that you'll actually leave more bullet holes on the wall when you do this. I once shot up the entire wall, and every single brick had a hole in it. I mean, what can I say? It's the little things that did and still bring me joy. Anyway, it's time to get on mission, and this background music is getting very repetitive. Hover over the Hitman poster and take your shot. We now see the face of Frank Castle himself, shrouded in darkness, barely visible on the left side of the screen. A text bubble appears above him and he speaks.
Everyone fights to control the streets. The Hitman is just another fighter waiting for the Punisher's knockout punch.
Oh yeah, perfectly cheesy, just the way I like it. The Punisher will always introduce a level with a quippy monologue, and I am all for it. Once he's said his piece, it's time to hit the streets. Alright, here we go. Now, first things first. All of the music that you've heard in the background up to this point is about 90% of all the music that's included in this game. Save for the music that plays during some of the boss battles that you haven't heard yet, this is really all the game has to offer. The reason I bring this up is because when you're working through each stage, it is completely silent save for the sounds of gunfire. And coming off of other Nintendo games that you've probably played before up to this point, this is very obvious and it sticks out like a sore thumb and kind of makes me uncomfortable a little bit. If you've listened to the Retro Wildlands podcast before, I always try to play the background music of the game that we're talking about as a way to try and immerse you into the game experience. The fact that there is barely any music in this game during the meat of the actual experience is probably the one thing I dislike the most. Now, maybe it was an intentional choice by the developers. The NES did have some strict limitations on sound channels, and it is possible the sound effects were prioritized over the music. There is a crap ton of gunfire, to be fair, and it would make the music a bit harder to hear. Or maybe they just left the music out as a way to create a more realistic, gritty atmosphere, which is probably giving the developers a little too much credit. What I think happened is LJN just wanted to get this game out the door, music be damned. Either way, it's just a little too quiet for me, so I'm going to be putting some music into the background anyway. Just so you know that normally there is none. Anyway, let's get some Punisher-esque tunes going. Perfect. Okay, my friends, let's lock in. On screen, you can see the Punisher himself near the bottom. We only see his upper body and his back is turned towards us as he's facing towards the street. We're outside on the dirty, dark New York streets and we can see trash cans and debris around, a couple of manhole covers, and even a stop sign that seems very randomly placed, but try not to think about that too much. Before we get going, let's take a look at the very bottom of the screen as there's some things down there that we're going to need to get familiar with. First, on the lower left is a picture of the weapon that we're currently holding in our hand. We start the game with an automatic machine pistol and 245 rounds, which are depicted below the icon of the weapon itself. Bouncing off the negative that was the lack of music, I will say a positive to this experience is the automatic firearms that we'll come across. No need to repeatedly press the A button to pull the trigger. We can just hold down the A button and let the lead fly. But before you get the idea that you'll just go all Rambo on all the scumbags out there, ammo in our weapon is limited, so we actually want to get used to firing our weapon in short bursts. If we run out of ammo, we still have the ability to shoot, but our fire rate will be reduced dramatically, which puts us at a serious disadvantage. I am trusting you to be conscious of your ammo consumption so we don't find ourselves in that scenario, alright? Now, if you look to the right of the weapon icon, you'll see an icon for a hand grenade. You only have 5 to start, but grenades act as a secondary weapon that you can use to dish out even more firepower, or get yourself out of a jam if you need some extra added oomph. If you press the B button, the Punisher will toss a grenade out in front of him and the explosion will take out anything caught in it. I try to make it a point to hoard those for the boss encounters at the end of the stage if I can, but if you need to toss one, that's how you do it. Moving to the right again, you'll see the Punisher's signature skull and the number 5 underneath. That is how many lives we have to complete the game. We can find extra lives as we go, but as soon as we lose all of our health, we'll lose a life. Obviously, we want to make it a point to not die, so one thing you're absolutely going to want to do is keep an eye on your health bar, which is all the way to the lower right. Now, in most retro shooters, it normally doesn't take much for you to expire. The oh-so-popular NES run-and-gun shooter Contra is an example, which allows for only one hit before your character dies and you lose a life. In this particular game, however, the Punisher can take quite a bit of punishment, pun absolutely intended, before he goes down for the count. Just be sure to keep an eye on your health. Frank can take a beating, but he is not invincible. Alright, that's it for the info at the bottom of the screen. You'll notice all of those things are smashed as far down as possible in order to give us as much view onto the stage as possible. And speaking of the stage, you'll find out pretty quickly that the background does not stay static. The screen will slowly scroll to the right as we go about our mission. We have absolutely no control over the speed at which this happens, so you'll just have to get used to the pace. It's not too bad though. Now, before the bad guys start heading our way, one more very important thing to go over: how to shoot. You'll see that white targeting reticle in the middle of your screen, which you can now move around with your directional pad on your controller. Go ahead and try to get used to that now. Nice, there you go. The reticle moves fairly quickly, but it does take a solid second or so to get from one end of the screen to the other, so keep that in mind. Oh, and make sure you take some breaks every once in a while and stretch out your thumb a little bit. I can guarantee that thing is going to get cramped for as much as we're going to have to move that reticle around. Hold up, wait a minute, who is that? Uh-oh. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, we can see someone slowly coming into view as the screen scrolls. It's a lone man in a blue outfit and what I assume are sunglasses. Very shady looking, especially since it's nighttime here in New York and you really don't need sunglasses. Oop, watch out! In one fluid motion, the guy points a handgun at us. He lets loose 3 quick shots. The goon's bullets head towards us and a couple hit us square in the chest. You'll see that our health bar decreases, but not by a whole lot. The Punisher in the comics is pretty well armored up, and I assume that's the case here. Either way, let's not give that bastard a chance to fire again. He picked the wrong person to mess with, so let's show him the error of his ways. Hold down the directional button and drag the white reticle over him. As a general rule of thumb, I always suggest aiming for the body, center mass if you will. Most basic enemies will go down in just one shot, and headshots don't offer any bonuses that I'm aware of. Okay, there you go, perfectly lined up. Now hold down your A button and let him have it. Excellent, down he goes. This marks the first body that'll make up the pile you're going to build up on our way to the Kingpin. Oh, before we move on, that reminds me. Did you notice how the Punisher behaved at the bottom of the screen when you were aiming your weapon? His body moved in the direction that you were aiming. Anytime you move your reticle one direction, either left or to the right, the Punisher will move that direction too. This right here is something that you're going to need to get used to in a hurry. Moving the aiming reticle and putting it on top of the thing that you want to shoot is easy enough, but moving the Punisher himself is needed so you can dodge incoming fire from the enemy. The reticle moves faster than the Punisher does, so that's the part that you're going to need to manage. If you need to move the Punisher all the way out of the way to the left of the screen, for instance, you may have to bury the reticle into the left side of your TV for a solid moment or two and wait for him to catch up to the reticle. This makes sense the more you do it, but this right here is the biggest element of strategy in the game. It's not enough to be on the offensive all the time. You're going to need to occasionally move the Punisher out of harm's way, and the only way to do this is to potentially move your reticle away from the enemy, so the game becomes this tug and pull between maintaining your offense and disengaging momentarily to put yourself on the defensive. Now, while all of this kinda sounds simple, and on the surface I kinda like the idea behind all of this whole experience will feel incredibly obtuse and clunky. It will be hard to manage all of the incoming threats on screen while you're trying to avoid damage. And the one thing that makes it all the more complicated is that we can shoot more than just the bad guys. Let me show you what I mean. As the screen continues to scroll to the right, a brick building will slowly start to come into view. Another lowlife looking for some high-velocity lead to the chest walks into view. Take him down. Nice. Now, see the windows on the brick building? You can actually shoot them out. These are one of the more obvious examples of things that you can destroy. Now, destroying things isn't something you can do just for the sake of it. While it is pretty cool unloading into something in the background and tearing it to shreds, this is something that you'll want to make a habit out of. Reason being, destroying objects in the environment can sometimes give you more points for your total score, or you may find one of several items that'll give you an edge in battle. Why don't you go ahead and take out that first window you see there? Sweet. While that did look cool to see, there was nothing there behind the glass this time anyway. Oh, wait a moment. As we scroll to the right, we can see a gap next to the building on the right-hand side, and in that gap is a gray trash can. That absolutely looks shootable, so tear that thing up. Ooh, look at that. A first aid kit fell out of the trash can. That will be very helpful. Since we've already taken a few hits, why don't you pick it up? How do you pick it up, you ask? Well, simple, my friend. All you gotta do is just shoot it. There you go, and you can see that your lost health was restored. Nice. Always make it a point to shoot objects in the environment whenever you have a moment in between shooting the bad guys and staying alive. Like that red circular not Coca-Cola sign above where the trash can was. Ooh, what do we have here? I always thought this icon looked like a tin can, but it's actually a magazine for your weapon. If you shoot that really quick, you'll get 50 more bullets added to your total. Like I said, make it a point to shoot things whenever you can. The items that you're going to find are really going to increase your chances at survival, but here's the rub. While the background graphics look pretty okay by NES standards, objects that are shootable in the environment aren't always inherently obvious. And what's worse, not every object takes the same amount of bullets to break open. The window you just took out really only required a single bullet to get the job done, but the trash can or other harder objects can take significantly more bullets to break open. The only thing you can do is just spray rounds in the environment and commit to memory what objects and things break away. Windows are a sure bet, but you can also shoot open manhole covers, destroy parts of vehicles, rip open trash bags, and more. There's even a level that takes place on a pier where you can shoot the legs of the pier holding it up in the water. I call this out specifically because shooting them sometimes nets you an item, but they show absolutely no signs of damage when you hit them with a barrage of bullets. When I was younger, I had no idea I could even get items from things like this, so when in doubt, just shoot it. I will say, I really like this game mechanic for what it is, and it just adds to the arcade feel of the game. But I never got the impression that this is something the Punisher himself would actually do. Whatever. It's a game and power-ups have to appear somehow. While some objects may take multiple bullets to break open, most enemies will go down much easier than that, which is good, especially when there's multiple enemies on screen. Like right now, for instance. Quick, there's another guy running onto the screen from the right, and another guy that's leaning out of the upper left window of that brick building. Quick, take him out. Nice, got one, but the guy in the window is opening fire. Quick, move to the left and dodge those bullets. Oof, that was close. Okay, now get that reticle on him and blow his ass out of that window. Ooh, watch out, another baddie just emerged from the window on the right. Quick, move back to the right. There you go, okay, swing your reticle back towards him and fire. Ooh, not too shabby. But see how hectic it can get in these moments? Balancing moving your reticle in order to keep the Punisher out of danger and moving your reticle to line up with the enemy takes focus and concentration. All the while, you have to be mindful of the fact that the screen is still continuously scrolling to the right, and you have to keep your eye out for items to blow open. And while you're doing all of that, you're trying not to blow through all of your ammo. There really isn't too much to keep track of, really, but there's just enough to where you need to make sure that you are dialed in at all times. Now, I just got done saying that there really isn't all that much to keep track of, but the game decides to throw one more curveball at you every now and then. As you go through gunning down bad guys in the streets, you may have noticed a certain lack of civilian presence. Which is great, you're able to more or less just shoot anything with a pulse as you move through the level. However, every now and then, you'll come across a bystander sitting against a wall playing a saxophone. I don't know who he is or why he's here, but he injects the level with the only music that you'll hear. He is a man that I affectionately call the Sax Man. Awesome tune, am I right? The Sax Man is the one and only civilian you'll come across, and he'll pop up in other stages too. He doesn't move, and he'll continue to play his sax until he's out of view. He does add a little wrinkle to the gameplay though. If you accidentally shoot him, you'll take a penalty to your overall health, so be sure to avoid that. And besides, don't be that jerk that cuts his awesome tune short. Oh yeah, that is tragic. Let us avoid that in the future. As we continue to make our way through the dark and dirty streets of New York, be sure to stay on top of the enemies that pop out at you. Like the one there that just dropped from the top of the screen. Nice, good reflexes. Oop, there comes another. Watch out to your right, there's a goon in a three-piece suit that's taking aim at you. Oh yeah, you moved out of the way just in time. Plant one right between his eyes. Oops, sorry about that, my guy. We got some blood on your suit. Oh, look over there in the alley. A couple of blue-ish trash bags are sitting on the ground. Trash bags are more often than not something that you could shoot open, so go ahead and spend a few bullets on those while we have a break from the baddies. Ooh, there we go. Spilling out of the trash bag is an icon for an assault rifle. Quick, we want that, shoot it. Oh, hell yes. The assault rifle is the one upgrade that you can get for your starting automatic pistol. It's basically the same weapon, but the fire rate is much faster. Why don't you give it a whirl on the bad guy who just stepped into view on the right? Woohoo! Man, did that feel good! The assault rifle fires quickly and efficiently, and is a fantastic weapon for some of the larger enemies that we haven't encountered yet that take more than just one bullet to put down, and the bosses at the end of each level. The obvious drawback, however, is the faster fire rate, which means that we'll be running through ammo much quicker if we're not paying attention, so do not lay on the trigger. Short, controlled bursts. Use your military tactics and training. Efficiency kills just as much as a bullet in this game. Speaking of, we've got incoming. Do your duty and take out the trash, will ya? Damn, you were on a roll, my friend. Continue to stay focused with your head on a swivel. There's something coming up that you're really going to enjoy. Ooh, in fact, there it is. Slowly coming into view on the right is a staircase leading to the downtown subway. Very out of place given everything that we've seen so far. I will say, if you ever do see anything that looks remotely out of place, be sure to do the logical thing and shoot it repeatedly. I mean, you never know, right? As you shoot on and around the staircase for the subway, a red arrow appears above the sign for downtown. The word "Go" is very visible on the arrow, and you know what that means, right? Shoot it! The screen goes black and we see the world's entering bonus world appear on screen. Now, these are the places to be. Bonus worlds, I believe, are in most, if not all, levels. The entrance to this one was pretty much out in the open and easy to find, but others may not be so obvious. Just be sure to shoot as much stuff in the background as you can to increase your odds of finding these. Bonus worlds really aren't different worlds or anything that video gamey. I like to think of them as different paths in the area that you're in. When the game resumes, you'll be in the subway with one of the trains in the background. Be sure to shoot everything that you can, like the windows on the train for instance. In bonus worlds, the chances for items to pop out are incredibly high. Ooh, first aid kit. What else do we have here? Ah, more ammo. Scoop up as much as you can, but be careful. There's going to be enemies in these bonus areas, so be sure to stay on your toes. Speaking of, here comes a goon running towards the left, firing his little pea shooter at you. It'll take some quick reflexes, but line up your shot and take him down. Good one. These running enemies can be a pain to hit sometimes, but I love watching them slip and skid to a halt after they expire. Very satisfying for some reason. With him out of the way, take out that next window. Ah, here we go. I was hoping we'd find one of these. Out from the glass pops a power-up with a vest icon on it. A Kevlar vest, to be more precise. Shoot it so we can strap that thing on. Now, these are the things that you really want to do your best to locate. Grabbing a Kevlar vest increases our overall health, which greatly increases our survivability. I think it takes 4 of these to increase your health to the maximum, and once you do, you'll have a much better chance of going the distance. The rest of the bonus stage is more or less like this. Continue to break things open to collect what power-ups and ammo you can. When it's time to leave the bonus world, the screen will fade to black and the words "Leaving Bonus World" will appear on screen before you're spat out to the New York streets to continue your mission. Back on the streets, it's back to work as enemies are constantly making their way on screen and you keep putting them down. But honestly, while this has been one hell of a ride so far, everything you've experienced up to this point is about 90% of what the rest of the game is. Enemies of varying types will jump on screen to try to kill you while you shoot back at them, all while attempting to dodge incoming bullets and take out objects in the background for power-ups that are vital to your success. It's actually very easy to get complacent. And with complacency in a game like this comes the risk of boredom. One of the reasons for this is that levels can really drag on. The first section of the first level here goes on for about a solid 5 minutes. That doesn't really seem like a long time, really, but you'll absolutely feel it. I will say the one positive about the longer levels is that at the end of the day, this is an NES game, and as a kid, I know I appreciated as much game time as possible, but as an adult, it's about my limit for how long I can really stay dialed in before needing a moment to collect myself. Another thing that I can contribute to boredom and burnout is the lack of enemy variety and your methods of taking them down. Now, when I say variety, I don't mean there aren't many enemy types. There's several different designs and some do different things. Some will poke their heads around corners, come up from underwater, sprint across the screen, or hang from the ceiling. But you are not really doing anything different when you see these enemies. You just need to be quick on the trigger, and occasionally an enemy might present you with a smaller target, but it's really about it. The only thing that truly shakes things up, though, is that the enemy will occasionally throw an oversized enemy at you that's either shooting a massive volley of bullets at you, or will chuck explosives at you, which will do ridiculous amounts of damage if you're anywhere near the explosion. These walking brick shithouses are a nice addition to change things up, but they're very hard to take down, and their presence can really spike the difficulty abruptly if you can't take them out immediately. Since they take so many bullets to exterminate, you'll often be stuck in one place for too long a period of time, sending shots down range, and that makes you a prime target for the other enemies on screen. The usage of your own grenades can certainly help, but it can take several to get the job done. And heaven help you if you somehow run out of ammo when you're up against these bigger enemies. The reduced fire rate penalty you'll be suffering from makes taking these guys out almost impossible. If you happen to have an assault rifle on you, that is your best chance. But even with the addition of these bigger, harder enemies, there's no variety to this game or different tactics that you can use to change things up. Really, if you take a step back and look at the Punisher as a whole, this game is just a glorified shooting gallery gauntlet, and your only goal is just to get to the end boss of each level. Speaking of the end bosses, how are the boss fights, you might be wondering? Surely there has to be some variety there, right? Well, yes, there's absolutely variety when it comes to the boss encounters, but rest assured, when you finally get to battle one, you'll be thrust into a unique situation, and oftentimes it'll be unclear on how to defeat them at first. Let's fast forward to the end of this game's first couple levels and take on Hitman so I can properly demonstrate what it is that I'm trying to relay. When we end a stage, we'll get some bonuses depending on how many enemies we've eliminated. Let's see how you did while I was talking your ear off just now. Total enemies 130. You eliminated 120. Nice. The game will calculate the percentage and give you a pile of bonus points based on that percentage. The higher the percentage you get, the more extra items you'll get at the end too. Hell yeah! 92% nets you an extra 18,400 points, and you get a bonus refill to your health, extra ammo, and more grenades. Nice. And it's a good thing too, since we're going up against Hitman, and we're gonna need all the help that we can get. Okay, are you ready? Let's do this. The battle starts immediately, and we are set against a backdrop of ugly, solid gray, and we are face to face with an attack helicopter. Hitman himself is inside, so we need to shoot the helicopter down. On the right side of the screen, you'll see the boss's overall health. Our goal is to run that bar dry. And you would think that just by unloading your weapon into the chopper, you would start to chip away at it, but you would be dead wrong. Don't believe me? Why don't you give it a shot? Nice shooting, Tex, but check out the boss's life bar. Still 100% full. Oop, watch out, the chopper is about to unleash a bullet storm towards you. Holy shit, that is a lot to dodge. So, what are you supposed to do in this case? Well, do what I did. Start shooting parts of the chopper and keep an eye out on the health bar so you can see what's causing damage. Let's try the base of the rotor blades first. Nope, nothing. Let's try one of the gun turrets mounted on either side of the chopper. They're very small and the chopper is moving around a lot, so keep your aim steady. Ah, that did it. The chopper's health gauge went down just a touch. Alright, this is where the fun part begins, and I am absolutely being sarcastic because this fucking sucks. You're going to need to chip away at these gun turrets, but you can't just stand still and shoot. You're going to need to dodge all of the incoming fire the chopper is going to be slinging at you. If you're not quick and you take a barrage of gunfire to the face, you are gonna go down in a hurry. You'll need to juke back and forth, sprinkling in gunfire in between volleys. Oh, and mind your ammo. If you happen to run out of ammo during this fight, you're pretty well fucked. Do you got all that? Good. Once you take out the gun turrets, the chopper's cockpit is going to open on occasion and you'll be able to shoot Hitman himself. While this is happening, Hitman is going to be chucking grenades at you, so be sure to keep moving so you stay out of the blast radius. Get hit by one of those head on, and it'll do considerable damage if it doesn't kill you outright. Are you keeping up with all of this still? Does that sound like a lot to manage? Well, if you think this is a pain in the ass, at least you aren't fighting Colonel Klieg in a tank that fires its cannon with explosive rounds faster than you can dodge. Or Seijo the ninja, who will actually get up in your fucking face and you'll have to time precise punches and kicks in between dodging his sword attacks. It sounds neat, but until you figure out the intricacies of that fight, you're going to have your ass handed to you. Oh, and fighting Jigsaw is almost the same way. He'll run across the screen shooting at you, but then he'll get close to you, forcing you into hand-to-hand combat. You're almost always going to take a hit in this scenario, so I hope you found enough Kevlar vest to boost your health to maximum. If it sounds like I'm frustrated, it's because I am. The bosses in this game are not fun to battle at all. Working through the stages themselves, shooting the bad guys as the screen scrolls can get repetitive, but at least it's fun at times and the difficulty is fairly manageable. The difficulty spikes up way too much when you get to the bosses in this game. And while I appreciate the fact that bosses exist in video games to be tough and to test the player, it's a bit much in my opinion in this particular game. I never found any of these battles fun or engaging, and the only reason I eventually beat them all and completed this game was because I put in rigorous amounts of practice and I put in a bunch of reps. So, that said, this is all doable. If I can do it, you can do it. But I did not enjoy the grind, not nearly as much as I was hoping I would. Okay, I'm starting to get a little worked up here, so I think it's time we wind this thing down. I usually keep swearing to a minimum, but I think I've said fuck at least 4 or 5 times now. Anyway, for what this game is, I largely like the Punisher on the NES. I am not an expert on the NES library or anything, but I don't think games like this are all that common on the console, so it has that going for it. The game itself is relatively fun. I generally have a fun time going through levels and mowing down enemies, and I genuinely felt like I was playing as the Punisher at his core. And when you really get settled in, it's kind of fun balancing offense and defense while shooting things to find items. I don't quite sink into that quote-unquote Contra flow state that I've referenced in other episodes, but when I am semi-focused in the Punisher, I am having a good time. The difficulty spikes that some of the harder enemies bring to the table, as well as the unfun boss battles, really do take me out of the experience though. And when I do end up taking out a boss and I go back to the brick wall to select another target, I often feel like stopping the game there because the repetition can be that exhausting. Shooting enemies is fairly responsive, but there are times the hit detection when lining up my crosshairs on my target was hit or miss. Even aiming for center mass, I sometimes missed a bad guy and they were able to take shots at me before I was able to put them down. It's certainly not the worst thing, but it happened enough to where I noticed it. Levels, while varied a little, do get reused a bit as you go, so there's not too much variety when it comes to the locations you're doing battle in. All that to say, while I like this game, truly, I recognize that it is not a great game. I do think that it's a great game for about 15 to 20 minutes, but beyond that, I was just playing it through only because I wanted to finish it for the podcast. So, what does that say for you, dear listener? Should you give the Punisher some of your precious time and attention? Honestly, I think you should. Even if it's only for that 15 to 20 minutes, I think you should give the Punisher a whirl. At its core, there really is something here, a little flicker of a good time to be had. It's a shame, though, that the developers couldn't quite stick the landing. The Punisher himself, though, is represented okay, I will say. At least the part where he's mowing down scumbags with military precision. I have no idea how the developers would have done it, but I would have loved the game to somehow capture the grit, tone, and depth of the comics themselves. Maybe they could have done that with some comic book style intros to each level or something. Overall, though, the Punisher on the original Nintendo was a pretty decent idea on paper and offers up some halfway decent arcade-style fun. I will say, if you're really looking for a more in-depth Punisher experience that really does the character proud, I would suggest the arcade game that came out in 1993, which is part of the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, or the Punisher on the PlayStation 2. The NES game, though? It's a decent diversion, but one I think would be best left for collectors and only the most die-hard of Marvel enthusiasts. And with that, our mission to enact punishment has come to an end. For now, at least. This has been episode 72 of the Retro Wildlands, The Punisher, on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. Thank you all very much for tuning into the show today. I was a little apprehensive about covering this game at first, as I thought it would be a little too simplistic to cover on the show. But after playing this game again, it was clear that this game is a bit more than I remembered it to be. It is still pretty simple though, but I'm finding the beauty in the simpler experiences as I get older. The Punisher is not a perfect game, and it has its share of issues, but I think it's worth a try if you've never given it a chance. It perfectly captures that surface level appeal of the character, and even if you aren't a fan of the Punisher himself, there's still plenty of fun to be had taking out the bad guys and racking up a high score. And for my money, you can't get any simpler than that. If you like the show today and you want to show it and myself some support, please consider subscribing to the Retro Wildlands on your preferred podcasting platform. I'm just one middle-aged dude trying to build up the show whenever my limited free time and often limited energy allows. I try to work on things for the podcast when I can, but I don't have a set release schedule for shows right now. Following the show on social media or bookmarking our new website will be the best way for you to be one of the first to know when something new drops. The Retro Wildlands is also part of the SuperPod Network, home of some awesome gaming podcasts and other gaming content, and you can follow us over there at superpodnetwork.com. Other than this show, you can check out some awesome shows such as Press B to Cancel, The 3DO Experience, the Pre-Order Bonus Podcast, Fine Time, and more. There's blog posts, videos, and tons of other content, so be sure to check all of that out by heading over to superpodnetwork.com. Now, if you really like the show and you have a little bit of time to spare, I would love it if you gave us a good review. You can leave us a star rating over on Spotify if you'd like, but you can also leave that and a written review over on iTunes, Podchaser, Podbean, and Podcast Addict, just to name a few places. Good reviews will help the show appear in more search feeds, I assume, but more than that, it'll let me know that you like what it is that I'm trying to do here and that I'm delivering something that you actually enjoy. However, like I say every episode, you are under no obligation to do any of this. Just the fact that you are listening to my show right now is much more than I could have ever asked for, so, above all else, thank you for being here. So, what's coming up next? Every once in a while, I'll have a member of the Retro Wildlands community reach out and suggest a game that I should play for the show. A decent amount of the games that I've played for the show have been from listener recommendations, and I think it's about time I appease the masses and take on a game that's been recommended a few times now. This game is one that I've always been curious about, especially being an RPG lover and fan of old-school Final Fantasy. This next game that we're going to cover, from what I gather, is pretty divisive amongst fans. One side hails the game as a very accessible RPG experience with a catchy soundtrack and fairly streamlined gameplay. But the other side feels that the whole experience is way too simplistic, the story the game is trying to tell lacks any meaningful depth, and customization one would normally come to expect in this particular genre of game is limited at best. But most of all, I've seen a decent amount of people say that this game is not a true Final Fantasy game. All of that and more have piqued my interest, and I'm finally going to take on a game that I've been putting off for years. I really want to see what side of the spectrum I fall on, so next time on the Retro Wildlands, we are going to dive into Final Fantasy Mystic Quest over on the Super Nintendo. I'm excited to finally give this game a try. I just got done saying that I really like simple experiences in my old age, so I'm wondering if this experience will be the sort of simple that I'll appreciate, or if there's too much simplicity for this game's own good. Either way, it should be a fun time going through this game, and I hope you decide to saddle up with our expedition next time, when we take up sword and shield as we gather up some crystals and save the world against the evil Dark King. Until then, my friends, my name is Nomad, and you can find me roaming the Retro Wildlands.